Welcome to the Profitable NDIS Provider Podcast, where we're joined by your hosts, Tania Gomez and Paul Bryan. In each episode, we'll be sharing valuable insights and tips to help you turn your NDIS business into a profitable venture. So whether you're just starting out or looking to take your business to the next level, you've come to the right place. Let's stop surviving and start thriving.
Hi, and welcome to the Profitable NDIS Provider Podcast with Paul and Tania. Hi, Paul. How are you going this morning?
I'm going really well, thanks, Tania. I'm excited for our first Zoom podcast today.
Yeah, and we've got a very special guest with us today. We have Phil from Partale. Phil, welcome.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Now, this episode's pretty special. It's all about how do we find and retain staff. And in the NDIS climate, finding staff has never been harder. And this seems like the number one challenge for our clients to grow and to run their business and to become or stay profitable is really around finding good staff. And so we thought there's no one better to speak to today than you, Phil.
Well, thanks. We'll see how we go through the call, but no, it should be a good discussion, and happy to share, our learnings from, working across a variety of different industries, obviously including, helping some players in the NDIS space as well. Yeah,
wonderful. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your background and about Partale?
Yeah. No dramas at all. So I guess my background is it's been a HR professional through and through. Started off my career working at a theme park down in Wollongong. So anyone down on the South Coast would be familiar with Jamboree Action Park. So I started there as a HR manager when I was at uni at Wollongong University. And, like all good Wollongong kids do, you make your way to Sydney at some point in your life. So moved up here and kicked off a HR career across a variety of different industries. So worked at Maersk, which is a shipping line and logistics company, for 3 years as a graduate. Then went over to Optus, which was an amazing experience, and then sort of grew up. I used that word at Challenger, a financial services business, an ASX-listed business here in Australia. But all along, much like everyone on this call, or most people on this call, I had an aspiration to start my own business. And I effectively saw a gap in the market 10 years ago. And that is effectively building a HR practice that works with small to medium-sized businesses. So at Partale, we can be the HR department, of our clients, or we can complement the HR department of some of our clients. And we also do other things in the training space, the leadership space, the wellbeing space as well. So there, that's a little bit about the core business of Partale. And we've also got a second company called Partale Talent, which is a recruitment and search business as well. So hopefully the insights we're seeing across both our businesses is going to be able to help everybody on the call today, and outside of running a business. Married to my wife, we've been together since we were quite young. 18 and 23 we met, and we've got 2 young children, 2 little girls, Polly and Grace, and a dog called Maisie, who's a big part of our life. So they're juggling family and work and hiring my own team. I can understand the stresses that many of you are going to be under at the moment.
Oh, look, a little bit left of centre. I need to know, were you 18 or was she 18?
No. Lucy was 18. I was 20.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Hey, look, thanks for that. And I think that really shows a lot of the background of where you've come from and give people a really good idea. A lot of our listeners at the moment are probably going, yeah, look, I've lost clients because I can't get staff in time. Yeah. Or, we've had people say, yeah, I want to work with you, but we just couldn't get staff. In fact, I literally had that conversation earlier this morning with someone. How can a small provider stand out in the crowd, finding the right people?
Yeah, no, it's really hard. And I was talking to Tania about this off air. But I think before we talk about the acceleration or the velocity of employing people, and I know that's a live challenge of many people on the call today, what we need to really think about as business owners is what is our business and what work environment is the language I'll use, are we going to be creating, for our team members, and being really, really clear on what environment we are creating for our team, and also the things that we can't offer. The reason I'm really specific on that is because there is going to be smaller NDIS providers that can offer certain things to their team. And there's going to be larger businesses that are going to be a little bit slower. They might be a little bit more red tape around what you can do as an employee, what you can't do as an employee, how flexible they can be with you because of their processes that they've got in play. And what the irony of this is that there's people out there that are working in big businesses or bigger businesses that want to work for a small, nimble practice. And there are people that think that they want to work for a small, nimble practice, but they really want to work for something which is a little bit more traditional and, process and procedure orientated. So what we talk about to our clients a lot about is being really honest and truthful about the work environment that you're creating, and don't try to be someone else. So, if you're a small provider, don't try and market yourself as a big provider. And if we've got some bigger providers listening to us today, don't try and market yourself as a small provider, because at the end of the day, people are going to come in and it's not going to be the experience that they expected, and they're going to go searching elsewhere. And in today's market, it's easier probably than any other point in my working life to switch jobs. For a variety of different, economic factors, which we can talk about another day. But the labour market is quite fluid right now, and it probably will be, for the short to medium term. So I think my first bit of advice has been really, really clear on and the language I'll use here is, what is your employment brand? So you've got a brand as an NDIS provider.
Yeah, cool.
Is someone going to use you as an NDIS provider? What's your brand? You communicate that to your clients. You don't go and tell your clients that you're, big and have all these fantastic things, under the hood. Replicate that into your employment brand. And the things that jump to mind, and I know we've got some questions later on, through the podcast, but it's around, smaller providers are able to care for their team in a much more authentic, in a much more, personal way. Mm-hmm. They're able to be more flexible with how people work, because you're not trying to grapple 20, 25, 30 people. You're only dealing with, a handful of people. So you're able to be a little bit more flexible in, how you work, the types of clients that they work on and the like. You can actually provide better feedback. You can recognize your team a lot better. People will feel part of the business, so they'll feel like they're accountable. They'll feel it when there's new clients coming on board.
Yeah.
Success versus if you're part of a bigger provider, they pick up 5 extra clients, you've got 50 employees, you're not feeling that success. So people, are about riding the wave, and what comes with that, you might lose clients, and as an employee, you feel that as well. But, there's a whole bunch of benefits of people working for smaller businesses, and not to mention the opportunity to get involved in things that they might not ordinarily be able to get involved in. So if you're a smaller provider, it's things like supporting the owner. It could be working with, working on your compliance issues, working directly with your, I don't know if commercial's the right term, but the terms of how you actually support people and setting up structures compared to purely just being out there, servicing people or helping people.
Yeah, that's really cool.
That's really interesting. Sorry, Paul. I'd never thought of it that way, as far as making sure you're clear on the size of your business. And I know Partale's done some work for my businesses in the past, and we have been really clear around making sure people are aware that we're a remote business, that we operate across Australia, that there's not an office to come into, but and also that the size of our business. And I guess that in that business we're a startup or startup feel. And it's, tech and creative. So being clear on that is something that we've done. But I never thought about the fact that people will feel more secure in a small business if that's where they're used to operating, or will want the corporate feel to things and more of the processes in place. And when I think about people who have left my businesses earlier than I would have liked, I think it is that they were, we say things when people leave like, oh, they will do better in big business, or they weren't used to working in small business. But I'd never really thought about the marketing side of that in the ads and in how we, that employment brand side of things.
Yeah, it's super important. And just because someone's come out of a bigger business, it doesn't mean they're not going to be suited to, to a smaller environment. That doesn't mean that. But then when you start thinking about how you're recruiting people, the questions that you're asking people, it's very easy to explain what your brand is. And if someone is unemployed, hypothetically, or they're desperate to get out of their current situation, they might say, yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking for. That's exactly what I'm after. But it is around thinking about what questions you start to ask people, how you enter a conversation, with a candidate in your interview, to really understand, do they have, forget about the technical skills you need to work in your business, but think about those generic, some people call them soft skills, that people need to be successful in smaller organizations. And your interview process is super important, and it's as important to focus, and I'd even say more important to focus on soft skills than it is to focus on the technical skills. And, we do a lot of, our recruitment company is focused on small to medium-sized enterprises. And yes, that can be anywhere up to 500 employees. But there is vastly different skills that people need to work in these smaller businesses. And that's sort of what we pride ourselves in understanding. And these are things like, dealing with change, dealing with ambiguity, things in small businesses change at a velocity so much faster than bigger business. One new client can throw things into a spin, and that can excite people, or it just scare people. Dealing with ambiguity is another key skill. And people go, well, isn't dealing with change and dealing with ambiguity the same thing? Well, no, not really, because, dealing with ambiguity is, I don't have a process. There is no procedure. We've never worked with a client like this before. We don't have a contract that suits this particular situation. That's dealing with ambiguity, is actually being able to turn into the unknown. We would have all have heard those people that says, where's the process? Where's the procedure? Where's my job description? So when you hear those things and you're in a small business, and don't get me wrong, job descriptions are critical to know what the core elements of a job are, but they're not there to be a laundry list of everything that someone should be. So when I hear those words from people in business, you then start to question whether or not they're actually the right person, for the role, especially with smaller businesses.
Yeah, that's cool. I definitely feel like people have found it difficult, maybe coming from being an employee and starting their own business, and now really not having an idea how they're going to interview someone for the first time and really get the information out of them as much as possible, right? Just on what you were saying there, is there a way that someone can learn like those skills, like to ask you talk about asking the right questions? Yeah. How does someone learn to ask the right questions?
Yeah, I think it's I like the way you use the word learn, but for someone that hasn't done much interviewing, and they've started their own business, think about what we've already spoken about today. Like, one is firstly getting super clear on what your employment brand is, and what your work environment is. So when you're starting, when your first thing you should be talking about to a candidate is about you and about what you are and what you are not. So then before even the interview starts, the employee or the potential employee has the opportunity maybe to call it. They might even hear, this isn't probably the right thing for me, and I'm going to actually call it. And sometimes we're scared about losing an applicant because we want to hire someone so quickly. If you can articulate yourself that well that someone knows that that's not the right organisation for you, you've absolutely dodged a bullet, because all they're going to do is, if you sell them into it, they might stay for 6 months. Then they start looking for another organisation to join. So I think the first thing around interviewing is having the confidence to really articulate what your company is and what it's not. Then in relation to the questions that you want to ask, it's then thinking through what the key requirements of the key requirements of the role are. So as I mentioned before, you've got the technical skills that you need to ensure that people have the appropriate qualifications. They've worked with similar types of clients before. They might have worked with people from different backgrounds before, so that they can actually deal with different cultural aspects that pop up in such a job. So there are definitely the technical pieces that you need to worry about, but obviously then just thinking through what are the key skills that people need to have to be successful in your business. So I mentioned before 2 out of many key skills for smaller business: dealing with change, dealing with ambiguity. It can be things around collaboration and working together. It can be things around the ability to be nimble and quick and fast. There's these things that might be really, really specific to your business that you might want to start asking questions to people through the interview process to tease this out. And the best way to do that is to try and get people into a conversation about these particular items. And then when the time is right, so you might be talking about, can you talk to me about a time when you've been faced with, just a challenge where there was no process or no procedure and you actually had to think on your feet and move pretty fast. And all of a sudden that'll give you an understanding of, what they might have done or how they've dealt with it or how they actually went about it. If you're a small business and you need someone that can think on their feet and be agile, but they're talking about it, they raise it to their manager, then their manager took it to their manager, then they had to wait 3 weeks for them to come back to you. Maybe they're not, and that maybe they're not the right person.
Yeah.
Compared to someone that says, do you know what? I came up with a list of 5 or 6 things that I thought could just get us over the hump with this particular situation. Had a quick conversation with my business owner, my manager. We agreed that was a great starting point. We put that into place, and then and then off the back of that, we quickly, built something for a future scenario. So you can get yourselves into conversations about their work experience, and then you bring it up into into your interview. And there's all different types of interviewing. My preference is to make people feel really comfortable. And some people say, well, aren't you, is that the right thing? Because they might not, you might not ask the difficult question. There's a balance between actually making people feel really comfortable. So then when they are super comfortable 40 minutes into a discussion, you can start bringing in those more difficult things with them.
Yeah.
And they'll feel a lot more at ease to either answer them, or if you've made people feel comfortable enough, what you'll find is that they'll actually be really open and honest with you on the things that they haven't done, which is even better, gives you even better insight about the person.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Definitely building that rapport is I think, a massive benefit.
Yep. And little things, right? Like when you're interviewing, for people that haven't done a lot of interviewing, watch for eye contact. If someone is, if you're interviewing someone and their body language is pretty consistent, but all of a sudden it changes quite vastly, pay attention to those types of things. Now, sometimes if someone looks up, that just could be them taking some time to think. But if they've been maybe looking at you the entire time, but then all of a sudden they're actually answering a question, but they're turning their head the other way, or they're squirming in a chair, those little things can be an indication that maybe they're not as comfortable asking that question and they're trying to come up with something to appease you. And so I'm not saying here that you become a human lie detector, but they could be telling the truth. But what I'm saying is that when you notice those things, that's when you should explore it a little bit more, and understand what they're what they're talking about. And then another one, so we've got the body language piece. When you're interviewing, any shifts in body language could indicate that you might want to just retest a couple of things. The other one as well is, and it's a real common one, if you're asking people what they did, and through the interview process, they've been using the word I did this, I did that, I did that. And then all of a sudden they start interchanging I and we.
Yep.
Really understand what they mean by the word we. Now, some people, when they interview, will always say we, because that's just the language that they use. But if you're in an interview or you're interviewing someone, it's a really good one to listen out for. And if people do start using the word we, just check in. Oh, when you said we, who else were you working with on that?
Yeah.
And then from that, they might turn around and go, oh no, it was just me. Using the word we. But that's really interesting piece if you really want to understand what they were doing. And if they were working with someone on a project or on a particular client, that's okay. Just then ask what was their particular role, in it.
Yeah, that's good.
So if I just wrap that up, be really clear about what your business is and what it's not. Take the time to really think through what the key non-technical skills are that you're after. Take the time, and maybe it's working with one of your team members. Maybe it's working with a friend. Maybe it's working with a fellow business owner to figure out what those questions are you're going to ask. And then just try and turn it into a conversation and make people feel comfortable is super important. And then a couple of simple tricks I could go on for days, but look at body language and the we and the I thing. Just
fantastic.
You're testing those things.
That's great, mate. Thank you very much for that.
No dramas.
All right, Tania, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'm on mute. So that was all really interesting, and all things that I think we could all learn a lot from. I've interviewed a lot of people, but the I and the we thing is something that I'd picked up as well. Interesting tips. I guess the question that I had was that, even just getting people into interview can be a challenge. Outside of things like Seek and Indeed and LinkedIn, where else can providers go to find staff and to start to find people that want to work with them?
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. So I think when I think about your industry, there are a lot of volunteers out there volunteering in this space, and a lot of volunteers that actually may want employment, but for whatever reason, they don't have it. So that, a lot of these bigger providers, and I won't mention names, but I think that's the right thing to do, will have a lot of volunteers working for them, and they create a great sense of community amongst their volunteer group, which is an amazing thing. There are some of these volunteers that would love a full-time job or a part-time job with the bigger provider. Again, they might not be able to have that. So you've got, it's really understanding the volunteer bases. I think in your local areas, who are those people volunteering? Having people that, and then it's about using your network in an industry like this. So if you know people that are working in a bigger provider, do they know who the volunteer network are? Do any of these volunteers are they actually seeking an opportunity? So I think don't forget about this volunteer network, which is sitting underneath, the aged care, the care industry, the care industry itself. I think that's super important. You'll also find that a lot of people that work in NDIS sectors, in my experience, are very community orientated. Very community orientated. Yeah. Start thinking about in your local community. How do you actually get access to people that are community orientated? So is that talking to your local clubs? Is it talking to your local community groups? And actually just been really proactive on the ways that you can get yourself out there, that you're looking for people in local communities to care for local people in those communities. So I think the volunteer network, knowing that people that work in these industries are very much community focused, I think that's super important. The other aspect of this as well is that I think it's something that a lot of people forget about. There's a lot of people that are studying, tertiary education, could be TAFE. It could even be people, even for some of you, like your more entry level roles, it could be people coming out of high school. How do you partner with your local community groups? Education groups to actually get access to people and let them actually know, what you can offer. You can take it back from what businesses do, in Sydney CBD, where they'll go out to the universities. They'll actually provide internships. They'll provide casual and part-time opportunities, 10, 15 hours a week whilst people are studying. Now, for any employer, a 10 or 15 hour a week person sometimes can be really hard to juggle. But if you're taking more of a long-term view, that if you can get someone into your business, you can nurture them, you can coach them, you can train them, then all of a sudden when they're qualified and they're not studying, you've actually got yourself access to somebody immediately that can actually join your organization. So I think for the people thinking about, out there at the moment struggling to find staff outside the traditional ways, for your industry, I think it's find out where people are studying and proactively engage. Think about the community groups in your local areas, because generally people in community groups are really naturally caring and giving and want to work with the local community. And don't forget about that volunteer network that's sitting underneath many larger providers, with some people that actually do want to, enter in.
Yeah, I really like that idea of volunteers and organising to talk in front of students and education providers. I've done a lot of that in the past when I worked as a childcare trainer and assessor, with engaging with the local childcare centres and getting work placements done and trying to get students into volunteering. And then also looking for staff myself, approaching places like universities and having a stall at their open days and things like that, to try and think of other ways I've kind of always said that finding staff that, they don't exist, they don't just sit there waiting for a job. The talent pool at that stage is already saturated. You need to start early in the process with almost like a nurture sequence to build your brand with people, so that as they're going through their study, they know about your brand, and you almost want to be an aspirational idea for them to move into when they do have that qualification or they do have the experience. So that all sounds in line with what you're saying there around the volunteer base and students, and really not just relying on things like Seek and Indeed, but building that employer brand again, coming through there. So the next question I have for you is, once you do find staff, keeping them seems to be a challenge. It seems like staff are usually paid the same award and they'll jump to another provider quickly, whether it's for an hour longer shift or 10 minutes closer to home. How can NDIS providers retain good staff, especially when it might not be easy to just increase that hourly rate?
Yep, it's a challenge that not only NDIS providers have, it's what a lot of companies have, across industry. The first thing is that what we're really good at doing as employers, and I'm an employer myself, is guessing what people actually value or what they need to keep them, in your business. And one of the things that companies don't do that well is ask their team what they value and what's important to them. There's a number of ways that you can go about that, but probably to simplify it, there's really a bunch of different things that keep people or motivate people in their jobs, and it's about figuring out and tapping into those things that mean the most to your team members. And I'm not talking about birthday leave. I'm not talking about providing people gym memberships. I'm not talking about that stuff. It is probably going a step a little bit further, and effectively you can drop people into sort of 7 categories, I guess, that motivate people at work. And happy to be challenged for 8, 9, and 10. But just thinking about it more broadly, the first thing that is about work-life balance. So if with your employees, it's actually then sitting down and actually understanding how can they integrate their work and their working and personal lives. That could be a big driver for somebody. Other people are really, really motivated by the relationships they form at work. That could be with their clients. It could be with you. It could be with your team members. If that's really, really important, well, then how do you create a community where, they've got those strong relationships, they've got those friendships that they come to work for? On the flip side, other people come to work, and that's not part of what actually that motivates them. Other people, they might be looking for aspirational leadership. They might want to work with a really strong leader. If your business is at a small size, that might be a really good opportunity for you to explain to them that they're going to have to work with you side by side. If you're a little bit bigger and you've got leaders, it's how do you actually make sure that people that really aspire to be a leader and actually really value leadership, are working with really strong leaders. Job fulfillment, so feeling accountable, doing a great job, leaving with that sense of purpose. These are the people that you want to make accountable for things. You want to empower, and they get that motivation, and that'll keep them engaged in the role. Other people want opportunity. How do they move up the ranks? How do they become a team leader? How do they become a manager? Not everybody wants that opportunity. Other people are happy just to sit there and do their job and do it really, really well. But it's around thinking about different strategies for those people that are actually looking, for career progression. You've then got reward, obviously, and we know that that's difficult. But when I think about reward, it's not about just what you pay people; it's how you recognise them. It's how it's how you thank them for the job that they do. We've all got people that we've worked with that don't really respond well to praise at all. That doesn't mean anything to them. We've also got other people that if you thank them, you give them feedback, you pat them on the back, you encourage them, you give them a little voucher. Those things go a long way, go a really, really long way to helping them out. So the sort of the motto of all these things it's like making sure that you tap in and you identify what's important to the individual. And the last one's purpose. Some people actually come to work for a sense of purpose, and you find that people that work in service industries like what everyone on this podcast is doing, or people that work for non-profits, a lot of their people are aligned to purpose. So they'll be looking at you around, are you doing things the right way? Are you caring for the people that we're looking after in a genuine way? So people that have got purpose, they'll stay with you if you're doing things the right way. So I think what it is actually understanding what motivates everybody, having a conversation with people about what's most important to them, and then tailoring how you lead and how you engage that individual, especially if you've got a smaller team. It becomes much easier than when you're employing hundreds of people.
Yeah. And so I guess the question that comes up for me listening to you talk about motivators is, how does a provider navigate that? How do they figure out what motivates their staff? Because it seems from what you're saying, and I guess from managing my own staff, everyone is motivated so differently. So is it that they need to do a, DISC profile, a psychometric profile? Do they need to do something formal and structured up front? Or is it just simply that they need to cater for all of those in all of things that they do and have programs that hit different things for different people?
Yeah, no. I think that the simplest thing you do as a small provider and, as a leader, is I run a HR business. I just have conversations with my team about what motivates them. It's not about doing a DISC profile. You can do all that stuff, don't get me wrong. But you think about those 7 categories. If I miss them now, because I don't have anything in front of me, I'm not reading them out. But I think about it as, leadership. Is that something that they really want to, that they work because they want to work with a good leader? Relationships. Do they actually want to have friendships and relationships with clients and the people they're working with? Job fulfillment. Remember, they're the ones that you make accountable, and you empower. Work-life balance. How do we make sure that their shifts are working with everything else they've got going on? Reward. Remember, they're the people we want to thank, pat on the back. Opportunity. People that are looking to progress, and purpose. So, those people that are actually going to be looking at you going, hey, I'm working for an NDIS provider. I'm doing this because it's a purpose. It's a really good thing to do, has a purpose about it, but they're going to be looking at you to make sure you're doing things the right way and not cutting corners. So, it's about having a conversation with those people about what they value. And people might say, I value all 7. It's about having a conversation around, well, what are your top 1, 2, 3? What things do you really value? And then ask them a really quick question. It could be, well, out of 10, how satisfied are you right now? And then that could be a 6. And then from there, okay, well, let's, why don't you go away? Let's touch base in a couple of days' time, and let's talk about how we move that 6 to a 10 or a 6 to a 9, and the things that we can do together. And obviously, you can't do everything. It's impossible to do everything, and you can always caveat that. But even the fact that you're having these conversations with people show that you genuinely care about them, and you generally want to improve the environment you've got. So, people will stay if you've got a great environment for work, a great work environment. But just remembering that a great work environment for one person is not the same as what it might be for the person next to them.
Yeah, like I often hear these little quotes or phrases around, employees join a brand and leave a manager, or, they all these type of throwaway comments. But it seems like it's actually it's multifactorial. There's lots and lots of things that attract people to a brand, lots of things that make people stay to a brand, and it really is dialing it down to that individual level so that you are connecting with your staff, knowing your staff, and making sure that you are, I guess, setting that future for them so that they can see themselves with your brand as they grow in their career.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And it doesn't have to be formal conversations. It can just be regular, informal discussions about, how they're going. It doesn't have to be the 6-month check-in.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff out there that regular feedback, regular communication, regular interaction with your team is so much better than, having a once a quarter, once a half year discussion. On your other comment, statistically speaking, the line manager does have the biggest impact on retention. There is no doubt about that. So if you're if you're an NDIS provider and you are the line manager of 7 or 8 people, it's just something to turn into. And if you have had, people leave your business, really just take the time and seek feedback and understand the things that, you may be able to change or shift in your style, to retain people. And I understand it can be really hard as a business owner because you've got a lot of different pressures coming at you. You know, financial pressure, family pressure, client pressures, regulation and compliance pressures, but always making sure you're carving out that time for your team is super important.
Yeah, look, I've been leading people. I've had people reporting into me since I was 19. I ran childcare centres when I was 19. And I like cringe looking back at how I, led people. I know use led in inverted commas because, I was bossing people around when I was 19. Yeah. And I think I've come a really long way. But just listening to you talk about the importance of connection and communication, I'm sitting here thinking, wow, I could do so much better with my current teams. And I'm sure we all can do better all the time, but it is really the simple things. Connecting with people doesn't cost any money. It doesn't require any resources. It's not something you have to aspire to. It's not like, having to save up for an amazing system that's going to make your life easier. It's something that everyone can do and probably easier to do in the beginning if you have those skills and if you invest in those skills of learning how to lead, how to connect with people, how to build rapport, how to be really clear on what the vision and mission of that business is and take them on that journey. But I'm not sure these are skills that always come naturally. They are really things that, at least in my experience, I've had to learn through trial and error and making a lot of mistakes and having staff leave and really reflect back on how could have I done that differently.
Yeah, it takes time. It's not natural. That's for sure. I don't think for many people it's just that the more you do it, the better you get at it. And the other, thing I encourage is that it's a lot easier to start off on the right foot and then make some mistakes along the way than do nothing and then completely change your style in 2 years' time with your team looking at you going, what's all this? What's going on here? So, you always, when you have new people come in, it's an opportunity to reset, how you're actually leading your team, how you're connecting with your team, because they don't know any different.
Yeah.
They're not going to see it as a fundamental shift in what you're doing. So I think, and if you've got team members right now and you're listening to this and you're going, you know what, I'm going to start making some fundamental changes, be open with your team.
Yeah.
So don't just change and not communicate, because all they'll do is go, what the hell's going on here? Why is Tania now doing X, Y, Z? It's about being really open, being a little bit vulnerable, and just letting your team know that, hey, you know what? I've been doing some been doing some development around around my leadership, and the few things I'd like to change. And one is actually connecting with the team more frequently. So we're going to put some catch ups in. We're going to start talking about what really matters to you. I'm going to give you some more updates on the business. I think that'll be really, really helpful for all of us. And, you can just preamble that so people don't just get blindsided on why you're changing.
Yeah, totally. I feel, at least for me, all talking about me now, like a counselling session for me, but I feel like the staff that I would report directly to me, I do this really well. Like, I build good relationships with my direct reports. I have long friendships with them. I think every person who's directly reported to me, I still have a relationship with, except maybe the ones when I was 19. At least my last 4 roles as a leader, all of those people, I could pick up the phone and call them and know that we could have a good conversation. So I know that my direct reports, I find it really challenging with the next level down of knowing those boundaries and not stepping on my direct reports toes, but still being influential enough or casting a big enough vision to get everyone that doesn't report to me on the same boat. I find that the middle management level is, having that level between me and people. I find that, I worry that my messages aren't coming through, that they're getting distorted on the way through, and trying to have as much direct contact without stepping on people's toes is a bit of a challenge, I guess, when you're growing from a small provider or a small business where you're directly managing all the staff to when you have 2 or 3 managers between you and getting them to understand your culture so that they are then living and breathing your culture with their direct reports. I haven't quite got that right yet.
Yeah, it takes time. It's trial and error. I think when you're doing this stuff, is always if you've got the people on here with bigger businesses, it's really about you're going to be able to be better influence and motivate and lead if you've got managers that are actually doing their jobs. So that's around setting direction for the team, providing them feedback, really understanding and connecting with their own team members, then that allows you not to be the day-to-day manager, but to be a motivator and an inspirer, and and be that person that they can actually then come to as, I hate using this term, but it's almost like an escalation point. It's like, hey, Tanya, I want a second view, and you can then focus on doing that stuff rather than actually being the line manager. But that's the golden nugget. It's getting leaders or managers around you that, that can do their jobs and do that really well. And sometimes that does involve investment in training and coaching, and support for them to make them successful. But again, if you can make your leaders successful for these bigger providers on this on this podcast, that allows you to actually focus on things that are really important to your business.
Yeah. So the last question that I have for you is that many NDIS providers have fully casual workforces. So what does good employee engagement and retention look like for a casual workforce? And the casual workforce could be geographically spread as well. They might not be able to connect with them in person regularly. How does this change this conversation around personal motivators, building rapport? Does it change it, or does it just make those things more important?
I don't think it changes it. I think it keeps it as important. But if you've got dispersed teams, there are things that you need to think about on how you connect your team and keep them together. And depending on your own circumstance, do you have people geographically dispersed? In the Illawarra, as an example, is that where you've got people that are geographically dispersed, where you've got team members in Gerringong, Thirroul, Dapto, if you've people live in the theme area of Wollongong? Well, then you're in an area where maybe you can actually get together and connect, face to face on occasion. Versus, do you have geographically spread teams where you've got people in Newcastle, Ballarat, Wollongong, Adelaide? Very, very different model. And then you've got to start thinking about this great thing called technology. That one of the great things that's come out of COVID is our ability to connect via Zoom, Teams, and the like. So how do you actually then get your team and pull them together and keep them connected? And I think that's probably the biggest thing I'd say that when you've got geographically dispersed teams, it's how do you keep people connected? We've got one of our clients at Partale. There's a director, general manager that leads a geographically dispersed team. Every morning, senior individual. He spent about 9 minutes writing a no-fuss email to the team. Absolutely no fuss. It could be the fact that he walked his dog last night. It could be the fact that, he's meeting, some potential new clients this morning. It could be a little bit of an update on where the team's at, at the current point. But every day he sends a quick email to people. Now, what that actually does is that, I've seen some of these email threads. Because it's part of their culture and their DNA of staying connected. Off the back of any given email, there'll be up to sort of a dozen responses on top of it, so the team can actually then be aware of what other people are doing. So I think communication is super important, and then I think if you can really understand what's important to each of these individuals, you're going to be going a long way.
Wonderful, great. There's so much to unpack there. I think I've learned so much from this conversation and hope that our audience has too. Is there more details that you'd like to give us about how our listeners can connect with you, Phil, and Partale, and the best way, if they've got questions specifically that they'd like to chat to you further on, how they can connect with you?
Yeah, that's completely fine. So the best way to sort of contact us, you can obviously do it via email. That's really easy. So it's and I'm happy for anyone on the call just to send me an email directly. So it's pjordan, so PJORDAN @partale.com.au, and Partale is PARTALE.com.au. So anyone can just flick me a quick email with their details and we can connect. The other way is that people need to drop me a call on the on the mobile. It's 0403 829 876. So happy for people just to drop me a text, and we can go about it that way as well. And we can go from there.
Perfect. Thanks so much for joining us today, Phil. That was a great chat. And for everyone listening to the podcast. This was episode 9, and next week we have episode 10, which is talking all about how to become a profitable NDIS provider. And we're talking to a SIL provider in Victoria about their growth from 10 SIL houses to 20 SIL houses, how they went there on their journey, and what we can learn from their growth journey, which is a really exciting episode. And I'm really excited to talk to everybody soon. Thanks again, Phil, and we'll talk to everybody soon.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Profitable NDIS Provider podcast with Tania Gomez and Paul Bryan. We hope you found today's episode informative and valuable. If you enjoyed the show, please don't forget to subscribe, leave us a rating, and share it with others who could benefit from our insights. Until next time, keep thriving.